Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it anywhere and everywhere. You can even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works.
Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today.
Then you can go ahead and distribute your podcast to Spotify and anywhere else podcasts are heard.
Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take the conversation with your fans to the next level, Q&A polls are the best way to get them talking.
With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions.
And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. We've been using Spotify for Podcasters, and we highly recommend you give it a try. Download Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters and get started. Okay, welcome back to That's So Fringy podcast. I'm Kristin.
I'm Bethany.
And I'm Rick.
And we're here today, just the three of us.
Just the three of us. You can make it.
Wait, can make it or we can make it?
It's we.
I think it's probably
Rick,
we. I'm not good with the lyrics. It's not my thing.
He's chronically wrong.
I'm more of a
lyrics.
hummer.
Yeah, that's true. So we are here today to discuss, well, eventually we want to get into some quantum computing things. Mm-hmm. But for those of us, me, and this one, and probably the dog back there.
Yeah.
Sully's joining us.
We don't know much about computers. So we would like for Rick to break it down Barney style.
Correct.
For us.
Take us all the way back.
All the way back. Back into time.
How does the World Wide Web?
Yeah. How does the world widely web itself together?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I don't know.
There's a lot of different ways, but if you're going to get to quantum, you have to really understand this stuff. And we've talked about that several times before, kind of amongst us, when we've talked about talking about the AI episode that we had and all of those things, where in order to understand that stuff and where we're going in our world, and these, we talk a lot about hidden technologies and UFOs and the government having UFOs and hidden technologies. And so being able to understand what they've hidden from you is hard to do because they don't want you to know. And so I don't think they want you to know much about the computer that's in front of you. You have to go to college and get a whole degree and all this stuff to be able to even work with them or do that type of stuff. And so the average Joe citizen like me or you guys or, the people around us, if you're not working in that field, you kind of just know what you know to get your job done. You learn what if you need to use Excel, you'll learn it. If you need to, most people know how to use Word, Microsoft Word. Most people know how to use Windows computers, but then you give a Windows computer person a Mac and all of a sudden they don't know what they're doing. Or you give a Samsung phone user an iPhone and they don't know what they're doing. It's because we're only really learning what we have to know to get to the next level, if that makes sense. And so taking the time to actually know how they work and everything like that, I think will, in my opinion, really open us up to how all of this quantum stuff works, how something like a UFO could possibly work, or how portals could possibly work, stuff like that. So I think it's a huge topic. So where to start, right? What do you guys think? How should we break this down?
I would like to know, all I know about anything is if I turn it on, it works or it doesn't work. Those are the only two options for me.
Most of the time it doesn't work for you.
Most of the time, it's some kind of anomaly. Electronics go crazy when I'm around. And I'll push the same button 12 times, like I'm doing the right thing. And then Bethany will come in and push it one time and it works.
Yeah.
So how, when you turn on a computer, how does
Let's start there.
How does Wi-Fi work?
Okay.
all of that.
Okay. So, well, it's actually nice that you started with the power button, because a lot of power buttons actually have a 1 on one side, or a line, and a 0 on the other side, right? So what that actually denotes is the ones and zeros in the code that computers read. We know that regular computing nowadays goes off of a series of ones and zeros that they put in little packets. And so it takes these packets of information, basically, because information is stored in energy. And it's really hard to explain, because you almost have to break down the package of information. So we're talking about like pixels, size, everything that would contain this video, as an example, that makes it the file that it is. It takes all of that and then takes it down to a level that it's able to travel, because you have to get it from one place to another place, right? And so it has to be taken by energy, because that's how it propels from place to place. And they used to do that with wires. So going back to the on and off on your computer, the 1 and the 0 is actually just exactly how the computer works. It goes in and it turns on and off these things. So if you have a sequence, as an example, 11011 in a pack, it would take that, it would send it through the wires, it would get to the other end, and that computer would read 11011, and it would have the exact same thing sent over there, right? So that's a very basic model, but that's all it's really doing, is toggling things. So let me think, how can I explain this? So a basic computer has a desktop, right? And the reason they call it a desktop is because we used to all sit at desks. Some of us still do, in cubicles and stuff like that. We have a desktop in front of us, and it's usually cluttered with a bunch of stuff. Or if you're a little more tidy like me, you like to shove everything into neat, organized piles and put it into folders and put that into a drawer or a file cabinet and stuff like that, right? So that's the same concept.
And then never find it again.
Yeah, never find it again, because I don't remember how I organized it. That's a problem.
Right.
Right. And so if I go and I want to clean off my desktop in my computer, I'm basically taking that, and then you can picture in your mind a desktop in front of you. You can take that piece of paper, you can pick it up, you can take it over, you can open a certain drawer, and then you can put that piece of paper in a certain file. All through that process, there's a lot of decisions that I'm making as a human, picking it up, moving it over here, putting it in, opening this certain drawer, and then going to a certain file, and then putting it in a certain place in that file. Those are all decisions I'm just making in my head, because I know where I want it to go. So when you do that on a computer, you're going through all of those steps. So you can take something from your desktop and you can go to your documents, which is a file cabinet basically, and you can go in there and you can put it in a file, or you can make a file within a file, and all of those things. And so everything has an address, because if you have basically unlimited space, how do you know what the edge of this table is? You know what I mean? Like, if you're outside of space and you're a computer and you don't know anything about matter or all of that different stuff, you have to tell it everything. You have to tell it, go to this edge of the table and stop, and then turn this way and go there, So if you take a table and you think of it as a giant motherboard, it has all of these different places on the table that are doing all kinds of different things, like powering on and off things. The power comes into it from 120 from your house. There's a little computer mechanism in there that takes it down to 12 volt so that it can power up your monitor or your motherboard without blowing it apart. All of these little intricate small things but they're doing the same computation, basically turning on and off switches, just basically turning on and off these little switches until this information gets over to this side where it needs to be, exactly as it's supposed to. And you want to do that in as short a time as possible, because nobody really wants to wait. And so, do you guys understand that? So you're cleaning off your desktop, so now picture you have a bunch of like a whole warehouse full of file cabinets. It's just, and the warehouse is called Google as an example, right? So now we'll transition to how does the internet work, right? So if you get on your computer and you type into your browser, which is really just a search query engine that enables you to put in addresses, basically. So think of GPS and how you can put in an address and you can go from the point that you're at to another point in the city, and it'll take you the fastest route to get there. So in order to go that fastest route, there's going to be a lot of different things that go into that Google, the program, already takes into account, or Apple Maps or Waze or whatever people use. And so it has to take all of those things into account as it goes. So if there's an accident here or there's road construction here, it will do its own calculations and get you there the fastest way possible. Well, that's what it does in the computer world too, is you basically have this network of cables, whether they be copper cables, which is more like a coax cable, like you hook up your internet, if you have a modem or a router, you hook that coax cable up, which is just basically a copper wire that sends those energy signals through. Or you can do it through electromagnetic waves, which is how we get cell phone signals. So these are waveforms that go through the air. There's waves of energy and matter and all kinds of stuff all around us. It's basically called the ether, right? We have this ether energetic, and our earth that we live on is electromagnetic. So there's always electromagnetic waves in the air. And what they've learned is that you can actually direct that wave to a certain point by giving it an address. It'll go directly to that over a frequency, because they've been doing that for a long time with radios and stuff like that. So basically, you're taking your radio and you're turning the dial until you get to your radio station. Everything in between there is static and weird. And you might blip over something and go, wait, no, you go back and you find that exact point. And that exact point is the frequency that you want, or the address that you're looking for. And so the same way that the radio works, that's how your cell phone tower and your phone, because your phone has a very specific IP address. That's what every device has. So your printer can have an IP address. Your phone has an IP address. A laptop, a computer, a desktop, all of those things have a different thing. And those would be, going back to the city navigation thing, those are addresses. So it would be like you sending a package with the post office to another location across town. That would be like you and a computer taking a file from your desktop to your documents folder and putting it in another folder. That would be a route that you want it to go in computer language, but it's looking for the fastest, most efficient way to get there. And then it takes it there. And the same thing's true with the internet. So when you're looking for information on Google and you get on there and you do your query search, basically there's a guy in a warehouse, right? In a computer analogy, he gets up out of his chair, he goes to a file cabinet, wherever it is, and he pulls it out, and he comes back and gives you that file that you're looking for. That's
I saw that on Bruce Almighty.
It might have been.
Where the guy's up in the...
Yep.
Or there was an episode of SpongeBob.
Yeah. So that's basically how you're getting information from point A to point B. You've got this guy sitting there, and the problem is it's just waiting for information. He's just waiting for something to do, right? And as soon as you start typing in, now think about it. You've got thousands, millions of people on the internet looking for all different random stuff. So you can't just have one guy sitting there doing that. So that's when you have to scale it up to massive computer systems. So when we talk about the internet, what we're really saying is, how are we taking all of these documents and pictures and everything that like makes up a website, and then we store it on somebody else's mega server somewhere, just like we would store it on our own computer. We're just storing it somewhere else. And that's called hosting. They would host all your information on their computer somewhere in a warehouse. And so what happens when, as an example, if Google has a warehouse farm of a ton, it's basically just tons and tons and tons of computer rack after rack after rack, and they've got huge cooling systems. And I mean, they're trying, because when you make a computer do that much work, it starts to really heat up. And that's another thing, is you got to keep it cool, and you got to make sure that the room temperatures are good and you're not starting fires. And there's like all of these different things that go into it. So they build these gigantic warehouses, and that's all that it's doing, is gigantic computer file cabinets. And when you search for something, it knows the address that you're looking for is in that Google farm, say in California, and it'll go through the fiber optic cables that are going all throughout our country and the world. That's right. We don't use satellites to send information back and forth, and that's a latency problem. It takes too long through radio waves. It takes too long to get all the way to a satellite and all the way back down. And with electromagnetic fields and stuff like that, there's too much noise. There's too much other stuff going on. And so with that much distance, you have a lot of problems, losing information, the packets getting lost. There's all kinds of stuff that happens. So they don't do it like that. They do it over fiber optic cables that are dug into the ground, and they go through trenches in the ocean. So, through the Atlantic, all the way over to England, and all the way from there over to Japan, and over to, there's literally cables, a network going all over the place. So when people say cloud, it's very deceptive. You're not taking a file folder and just throwing it into the cloud. Like, I understand it's a clever term, but what it's really is some other dude's computer. That's where you're storing all of your pictures on Google, all of your pictures on Apple, all your Snapchats information, all of your Facebook information. Like, if you have Facebook and you've had it for a long time and you've got a ton of pictures on there, all of that stuff is stored on some dude's computer somewhere. And it just so happens to be owned by Mark Zuckerberg, and there's this big, and it's a huge warehouse, but that's how it works. And your specific pictures and account and all of that has an address. That would be your house in that neighborhood of that warehouse. And so when you look for your address, or you get on Facebook and you log in, you put in your login and password, that gives it the information it needs to go to your address on your street in that warehouse and pull your information in full. And so then it gives you that whole package deal of all of your stuff. And then you click on things, and it then goes back to some other dude's computer in that warehouse at your house on that block. And it pulls that one picture out of that file that's in the back, and that's all organized. That's how the computing works, is it's basically just traveling information from point A to point B. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yes. I have a question.
Okay.
So if things are mostly going through fiber optic cables,
Mm-hmm.
how does the Wi-Fi get it into the cable? Like, if my computer is not hardwired in, how does it get that to the fiber optic cable to get to the server farm?
Yeah. So the internet has infrastructure, meaning everything starts with those giant factory warehouses with all of the cooling and all of the processors and all of that stuff. And then it's pushed from there through fiber optic cables, because they found in the past, they used to use copper wire, which is the coaxial that we were talking about earlier. You hook that up. And then they went to being able to do Wi-Fi, which Wi-Fi would be the electromagnetic field we were talking about before, where it sends a signal over frequency, back and forth over frequency. So But in order for you to be able to do that, you have to get the internet to your house first, right? That's why we have to pay these providers, these internet providers, to give us access to the internet, right? When all they're really doing is collecting that information that you're querying. So you ask the question, it goes to your provider, and then your provider gets it from there, and then it goes back to your provider and then back to you. They're just the middleman that's making money off of you, when really they don't need to be there. Because if you just had a direct connection from that ocean wire, that you would have direct connection to, you don't need that middleman, but that's how they make money. So they charge us for that optic cable to go under the ocean and all the way over here and go to your address at your house. And then from there, most people don't have fiber optic going to their house because it's pretty expensive and it's newer. So a lot of new buildings have a lot of fiber optic in it, things that are new construction. They'll have it because they know it's faster. They know it's the future. You'll see this all the time. You see road construction and they're just pushing wires into the ground. That's fiber optic cable. They're trying to redo the grid because they know that the coax way, the old way with the copper, doesn't work as well. The problem is it doesn't go as fast because it's going over electrical energy. So just like you wire a house, you can send electrical energy through a copper wire, right? So you can send information from that warehouse to your house across the world, but it would be very, very slow. And that's why the internet used to be so slow, because that's what they were doing.
Dial-up is, if you've ever looked inside a phone cord, it's got copper wires in there, right?
Yeah. And it's taking that information. And that's why you used to only be able to be on the internet or make a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're old enough to remember that, you'd be like, get off the phone. I was on the internet. Mm-hmm. And there was no way to do both because it was one coaxial cable coming out of the wall going into a splitter. And then that splitter would go into two. So it would go to your phone and it would go to your computer. Well, that splitter wasn't able to distinguish. It didn't have a switch to go back and forth, kind of like a train running on a track. It can switch and go to the other side, or it can go this way.
But it can't be on both.
Go on both tracks, right? So that's how that would work. And so that's why it would cut you off. Well, they went away from the coaxial because of that reason, and they had to do some things to make that work better. But as far as bringing it over fiber optic cable, that's actually sending it through light. That's why it's called fiber optic, because it's a light ray, basically. That packet of information is stored in that light ray. Don't ask me how it works exactly. These are just things that I know from research. And it sends that light source because it can move now at the speed of light. And so now getting from your warehouse to your house is way faster because it's the speed of light. It's like if you were
the speed of copper.
Exactly. Yes.
My in-laws, they live out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Like you guys know where they live, way out in the boonies. And they had, I don't remember what internet provider for the longest time, but they just got fiber optics out there.
Yeah.
And it's like insanely faster.
Oh, yeah. Because it can move at the speed of light.
Way out in the boonies. They have it out there.
So do we have fiber optics here in the city? I mean,
so
it
the
would
thing
be stretching it to call this a city, but you know what I mean?
The thing is that infrastructure is still building because fiber optics have been around for a while, but the infrastructure and the money and the manpower to upgrade all of that stuff takes a while. And so, yes, they're doing it. They're upgrading everything. But that's why some people living in smaller rural areas or out in the boonies, like you said, they don't have access to that stuff. Some of them only still have phone line, internet, broadband, dial-up, and you're like, what? This is 2023, but it's just because of their area and the infrastructure. And that just goes to show you that if they were to get and that's why they used to do this, if they would give you a satellite dish and you would be able to pull it from the satellite dish, right? Because now you're pulling it from, as Kristin was asking earlier, the electromagnetic field. So now you're getting that frequency that is delivered to your address exactly through that. And then from your satellite feed, then you have internet through a coax cable in your house, right? Because it comes into your antenna, and then it goes through a coax cable into your house, and then that goes into your modem or your router. And then you can push that to your TV, or you can push that through a router into more electromagnetic waves inside your house now, and that are looking for a specific address. And that's why you have to sign up onto that specific SSID to get a hold of your router. You're telling the computer which address to go to.
Okay.
So
hopefully that makes sense.
When was the internet started?
Well, it was started a long time ago, but it was only brought to the public in the 90s. I can't remember exactly when.
Wait, but they had to have had phone cables in space, because when they landed on the moon, they called them with the phone.
Nixon called them. On a house rotary
that was plugged
phone.
into a copper cable.
Yes. And it probably got there super fast.
Right. And they were talking in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Not
and pay
from
no
a movie
attention
set.
to the picture of the moon of the Earth from the moon on his wall as he's making that call. Pay no attention to that.
No.
I digress.
Sorry.
So
I'm in rare form tonight.
it's good. I like it. We got to keep it spicy. So let's talk about speed, right? Because we're all about, especially in America, we're all about, I need my hamburger right now. I need my burrito right now. I need the TV to just work. What is happening? I need my internet to work. And we get so frustrated, right? Well, that's called latency. That's the amount of time it takes your signal to get from that warehouse across the world to your address at your house. And how is it doing that, right? And so depending on your particular service from your service provider and your infrastructure in your house, it's going to depend on how fast your internet is. Because some people say, I have really fast internet. Why is it going so slow? But they're still working off of coaxial coming down their wall and going all the way across their house. So it has to run through that whole scenario. And then it has to get all the way up to your router where you have it, maybe on the third floor because you want it to broadcast better. And so now it's got to go all the way up there, and it's just slow. It just doesn't work. And that's why a lot of providers now are going to, once it's in your house, you can go fiber optic right into your house, and then coaxial for a very short distance from your fiber optic lead or end of line to your router, which makes it go so much faster because, yes, it's copper, but it's only from the wall to your router. So that's super simple. You can just do a really short cord. And so the speed of which it gets there is based on so let's say that the copper is a car, and that's how long it would take you to drive there. And the electromagnetic or the waves, that'll be like a train or a boat, right? And then if you were to take an airplane, that would be fiber optics. So if you're going from that warehouse to your house, and those are your three options, that's about how fast you would be able to get there. And obviously speed of light's a lot faster than an airplane, but you've got a lot of airplanes out there that are really fast. They can break Mach 3, who knows what the secret stuff can do, but and that gets more into quantum. And that's why I wanted to explain all of that, because if you know how information travels and how it's broken down and brought back into another space somewhere else, because we're traveling information through cables, and we understand that, right? If you travel information through fiber optics, we kind of understand how light goes, but most of us are like, I can get that. I get how you can just shoot light across the world. That's easy. But when it gets to quantum, most people are like, you got me. I have no idea, right? Because it's such a tangled mess. And so going back to the very beginning where we talked about the on and off switch of your computer, the 1 and 0, we talked about that's how your computer works now. That's how it does math, is it'll go through Just picture a whole bunch of file cabinets in your computer, really stacked close together like this, and it goes through a grid. So it'll be like 1, 0, and it's basically just turning one thing on and one thing off, and two things on and two things off, or however the sequence is. And it just does that so fast as it's going through. And the more processor you have, or the faster processing speed you have, the faster it'll do it. So if you have a good computer and you have a good service, you can get a lot of stuff done really quickly. So when you're trying to do that over quantum, now we're talking about those ones and zeros are now what they call qubits. So those ones and zeros are called bits. That's why they call them megabits and gigabits and all of those things. That's the amount of bits that are in that card. So, 1 gig is that amount of ones and zeros spaces that you have in that section. You have a lot of space, or a lot of processing power, as it were. So if you're going into quantum, now you have these things called qubits, and they're basically like, we'll say, an electron. It's very, very small, and it's moving around like this. Instead of clicking on and clicking off, now you have, picture like a circle with 2 lines, kind of like an atom, how it kind of does this. So just think of like an arrow on the inside of it going in all different directions, like trying to spin around inside of a ball. And those are the possibilities, right? Whereas 1 and 0 is either off or on. Now you have a qubit that has a ton of different possibilities. And when you have a positive and a negative, you're going to have one pointing up and one pointing down. So from all of the options, they stop and lock in, because one's positive, one's negative. Just like everything else in our earth, you have an opposite, and they'll lock in. But then when you move them away from each other, or they call it quantum entanglement, right? Where you take one qubit and you entangle it with another qubit, and then they do positive and negative, and that makes a connection, if you will. So in order to do that with the qubit and pass information through them, you have to get them together and sync them so that the quantum computer can process all that information. It also does another thing called, what's it called? A superposition, so let's talk about superposition. It's like you're running through a maze, right? And if you and I were to do a maze, we would be tracking with our eyes all of the lines and all of the possibilities, right? Whereas a computer, it goes through code to where it'll go through and it'll say, move forward, move forward, move forward. If there's a wall, turn left. If move forward, and it'll go through this series, and it'll literally check every single possibility before it finds the answer, and then it'll give you the answer and you can do it. Whereas the qubit is going to basically look at the whole thing. It's like we do. We're going to look at the whole thing from a 30,000 foot view from the top, and we're going to say, that's the only one that makes sense. Because we can do that on our brains really quickly. Whereas a computer can't move the speed of, it doesn't have a processor like our brain. For some reason, God created our brain to be faster than all of these supercomputers that we have, and all of the quantum computers that are coming, or that they already secretly have. Our brains work a lot like a quantum computer, whereas we can process information from a lot of different angles. So you and I can go to the library and we can pull out 4 or 5 books, and we can read all of that information, and then we can come to a conclusion and write a paper, an essay on what we learned, and then we can turn that in, or like even further, a long dissertation, and have this whole book written about it, where we took all that information. But that takes a really long time. We have to read, we have to research, we have to compile information, then we have to write rough draft after rough draft until we get it right. Well, a quantum computer can do all of that in seconds, sometimes even milliseconds. It can take, because it's pulling qubits from all over the place. So going back to the warehouse analogy, just think of you were to take these balls that I'm talking about, these qubits, and you were to throw billions of them into the air. and they're just all over the place, right? And you now have information stored on all of them, and they're floating all around you. And you want to pull that information in to here and pass it from one side to the other. So what you do is somehow, I don't know how they do it. I don't know what kind of technology that they have, because I don't work in that field. I'm just a researcher. They basically can take one qubit from way over here outside of space or time or anything that we know, because it's literally has an unknown space and time. It doesn't care about space and time. It's just information. You can take that and this information over here, you can pull them together. And what are they going to do when you, what's it called? Quantum entangle them. What's it going to do when they come together? They're going to go and they're going to connect, because it's positive and negative, and they're going to complete together and pass that information. So now the problem is you've got one packet of information on this one and one packet of information on this one, and it's just going to copy over and now exist in two different places, if that makes sense. And so then if you untangle them, so I can take one from Africa and bring it over, and I can take one from the California Google warehouse, and those two can come together and lock together, pass the information, and then go back. And now it has the same information on both of them in a millisecond, like that. Almost like teleportation, if that makes sense. Because you can just, and the information's from one place to the other. Now, if you have a computer that's able to control almost like a valve, which way the information goes and exactly which information goes and that type of thing, now you can send specific information by sending them together, passing that information, and sending them back to where they were instantaneously. So to use that analogy, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. Who uses these quantum computers? Obviously, we have regular HP, Macs, in our homes. Mm-hmm. Is this like an elite thing? Is this like there's one quantum computer that only somebody special knows how to run?
I think when they built their first quantum computer, it was like they were just trying to figure it out. Who knows who gave them the information or how they got it or how many years it took them to find it. Mm-hmm. Or put it together. We could say that there might have been some sort of outside entity that gave them the information, whether people believe in aliens or people from outer spaces or the Anunnaki or the Nephilim. Like mm-hmm. There's all kinds of different options for who would have shared this information with people. But the fact is now is you've got places like IBM that are making basically quantum computers now. And other places, like a lot of colleges in like UC Berkeley and Cal and Stanford and all of those, they're all in on full on this type of thing. They're trying to, because that's where Silicon Valley is. Everybody, that's mm-hmm. where the big hub for all of that stuff is. So they're trying to learn how to make this stuff beneficial to them, typically, mm-hmm. where they can create this, but then they can sell it to companies for them to use in a certain way. So they could set up a quantum server farm, and then that person could have some sort of a device that would be able to access their quantum server farm instantaneously, mm-hmm. which would change the way we do everything, if you think about it, because it would be like, so instead of the guy at the warehouse getting up from his desk and taking the piece of paper and walking it down all of these aisles and rows, which is how it used to be done, or now he could get on like a Segway and ride his way over there. Like there's ways to speed it up. Or with quantum, he turns and walks through a portal, pops out exactly where he's supposed to be in front of the right file cabinet, opens it up, pulls out a piece of paper, turns and walks into the portal and pops out right back at his desk and gives it to you. Like that's technically the change in speed that we're talking about with quantum, where things are just instantaneous.
So are we talking just a change in speed, or are we talking physically being able to move something?
I think we are talking about physically being able to, I think the government right now, I think it's been well documented in Congress with the recent, people coming out, the whistleblowers. There was the Whistleblower Act that came out where people could come out and say, even if they were under an NDA, they could say whatever they wanted to, but they had to do it in front of, Congress, and they had to get it on the congressional record and a lot of people didn't want to do that. You have certain people that'll talk about it, but they don't want to be in front of Congress. So there's a lot of people that have said, they already have this stuff. Those UFOs that you're seeing in the sky, those are ours. We have them. Now, they're not disputing that maybe there was some other form of alien race or people from outer spaces that gave them that information, but they're saying like Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, all of these different military industrial complex people have made these things and they exist, So then when you think about quantum and people talk about a UFO as an example, a UFO makes its own electromagnetic field. If you think about it, like the world around it as it's flying around is an electromagnetic field, the earth that we live on. Right. And so what they can do by making their own electromagnetic field is they can put themselves in a bubble, basically a world within a world, so that they can move through it without the constraints of the way that our time, matter, and energy and all of that work. They can go through portholes. That's how they just disappear, because they can quantum entangle that UFO into another space somehow. Don't tell me. I know that I don't know what I'm talking about for the most part. I know that I've done a lot of research and I've put all of this stuff together over a very long period of time because I'm a nerd. But reading all of the information doesn't mean that I have it all figured out. I don't ever want anybody to think that I'm like Rick's just saying he's got it all figured out. What I'm saying is,
from the little bit of research that I've done, even the people that are working on these don't know how it works. They just know that it works, which is kind of creepy if you think about it. They're like, yeah, we're not really sure how that happened, but it happened and we can replicate it, so we're just going with it.
Well, if you think about some recent movies that have come out or recent TV shows, like we were talking about quantum the other day, Bethany, and you mentioned The Flash.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. Have you guys seen that show? Because
I know that I haven't seen it.
Quantum, that's what pops into my head for some reason, because they have a quantum computer, I know. And basically in the show, he gets, I don't know, I should bring my 14-year-old son on to explain it, because we've watched, I think, all the seasons
should you phone
20
a friend?
times.
Yeah.
But he somehow gets electrocuted or something to where he now has this speed of light. Him as a human, as a person. And they have a quantum computer where they do like trainings and he can train against these certain things. It's super weird and I don't understand it at all, but that's what I think of. And then I also think of that movie, what is it, where he opens the portals?
Doctor Strange.
Yes, Doctor Strange. So like, we know that they tend to
well, and not only does he,
doing.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but not only does he spin that thing and go through a portal, but that one lady at the beginning where he's kind of chasing her and she's like changing the whole atmosphere of the world. Like she's moving everything sideways and upside down, and then they're like falling through portal after portal, like because she was fully understanding how to manipulate time, space, and matter. And how do you do that without understanding quantum the way that people are saying? They don't really even know how this works. They just know that if we do this and this and this, then we get this result, but we also get a ton of errors. And so basically what happens is they say, it's so cool that you can get that from there to there instantaneously, but how do we do it without killing everybody, ruining the machine? Like there's all of these now errors that you have to go through. And the thing about quantum computers is they're very sensitive to noise or vibration or anything like that. Like they have to be in a completely soundproof, like no sound, no nothing ruined. They have to be steady, because any type of interference or noise or anything like that will really mess with its ability to do its job. and could throw it way offline if you move it too much. But they basically look like chandeliers.
Somehow the quantum stuff has something to do with sound frequency. If sound frequency on a basic level can interfere with a quantum computer, then that's kind of makes me think it's got to have that in its technology somehow, somewhere.
Yeah. Well, that's my speculation.
Like a big magic trick.
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem like it's like a big magic?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Well, if you think about Tesla, that's really what
the Willy Wonka when they send the little boy up in the space and they put him in 1,000 pieces and then he comes back together and he's miniature, remember? That was like going through a portal of sorts.
And that movie, that
was a while ago.
That was basically sending him over waves or frequency waves or electromagnetic waves. Yeah.
And then he comes back together and he's tiny.
Sending him as information, or you see it in Star Trek where they're like, beam me up, Scotty. And the dude kind of disintegrates from there and comes back.
So have they known about these quantum computers for that long?
Yes.
Had to have.
Okay. All right.
Dude, they had all the stuff that they showed you in Star Trek when they were showing it to you. Like if you think about making a show, how would you be able to because you have to like make it up in your mind to be able to make things work. Like the doors open, that's really not that big of a deal. Walmart can do that. When you walk up to it, it opens up. That's seriously small amount of code and things. Like when you see something open, when you don't see something close, that's like a ones and zero thing. It's so simple. But then when you get something a lot more elaborate, like the food processor type of thing that's on there, like how does it generate food out of nothing? Well, what is it pulling from? Because if it's quantum, it can pull from anywhere outside of space, time, matter. It can pull from anywhere and then bring it in and put it together the way that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's not like a trick of the mind. Like you're eating, mush, and it's like, oh, this is the best sushi I've ever had. It's actually bringing you the best sushi you've ever had.
Yeah, and it looks real. It is real.
It is real. Like even even like a 3D printer for food, which I've seen on shows or whatever. Like they have to have the material in the machine to 3D print something.
Oh yeah,
right.
So this is like totally different. This is like actually bringing. So then in that vein, if I'm going to go through a portal and I'm sitting on this bed with Bethany and she doesn't want to go through the portal, but I do, how does it keep her from going through with me? Or how does it keep the bed from, or even a speck of dirt to go, like how does it get just you to go through it? Or is that part of the mistakes that they haven't figured out yet?
That's that's a lot of the correcting errors is in computing. You have to give it an address, right? It has to have a sender and a place that it's ending up. And then it also has all of these worker bees, little computers out here telling it the fastest route to get there so that it gets to you faster, because over time they've had to make that process faster so that they can encourage you to spend more money, right? And they already know how to do the quantum stuff. That's the laughable part about it, right? So at that level, they already know how to probably do holograms. And I mean, they did that hologram of Tupac and everybody was freaking out. Like Tupac is on the stage right now. There's a hologram. Like, how do you do that? How do you project that? I mean, a lot of people are like, well, it's just projection.
That really Tupac then?
Is Tupac even dead?
Oh, I have so many questions about that.
That's another episode for sure.
I know.
On the next episode.
Yeah.
I see.
Oh, that's Dr. Dre. But anyway.
I mean,
they were the
same era.
It was so good. It was so close. Yeah, but that's the basic. I mean, that's the overview. So going into a cell phone just for, poops and smiles, we could take the signal from so in order for a cell tower to get a signal to give to you, it has to go through a fiber optic cable. Like it just goes through a fiber optic cable. It's the internet.
How did I think everything was really in a cloud?
Everything is literally in the cloud in our minds, right? Everything is floating around us because that's what they want. They want you to be so stupid that you don't realize that all they're doing is pumping it up that thing, and then it has a computer on there that tells it to go to different addresses, like your phone address. So you call up information, it asks through the wave to the cell tower, then it goes down the wire over to the warehouse, comes back through the wire, goes up and sends it back to you. So if you're on a phone call and you're walking through town and you go from cell tower to cell tower, it knows that you're going to have to jump frequencies, and it has a thing in your phone that will do that on its own. So you're walking from this one and you're under, say, 643 hertz or something like that. That's the frequency that you're getting, and you're walking along. And then this tower over here is a different frequency, but because they have to be staggered, you can't have two that are that close together because you'd have a lot of errors there, because it would be popping back and forth and be confused. So they stagger them. So they have like a package of frequencies to one cell tower, and then the next one has maybe the next 10 or 12 or 30 or whatever, and then the next one has the next. So you would have to jump from one to the next, and your phone just does that as you're driving. It does it on its own. It has an internal processor that's telling it to do that. As you drive by, you get this one, you get a drop call, because
which is why
you don't have one.
Right, because it makes sense when people are like, I obviously love, well, me and Bethany love true crime, and how they can pull your cell phone data, and they can see your movements just by where your phone was at. Which, why does anybody take their phone to commit a crime? I mean, come on, this is like murdering 101. You cannot do that. But
or
it
take
makes
that
sense.
person's phone for some reason.
Right. Yeah.
The one you murdered, just take it with you. Sure, that's a good idea. They probably can't track you.
No.
But no, I mean,
so that's how that works. I don't know. I feel like I looked behind the curtain, and maybe I didn't want
your
to
head
because
was in the clouds. I mean, that
Oh,
thing.
Oh,
I see what you did there.
Yeah,
I was.
It's a play on words. That's what they do. You know what's
They
interesting
confuse
to me,
you.
though?
Yeah.
Yes, always confusing. You know how you can put in in your GPS, you put in an address, and it's out in the middle of nowhere, and you lose cell service. But as long as you had it loaded prior to losing cell service, it'll take you where you need to go with no issues. That's interesting.
Because it sent you the whole package. So when you asked for all of that information, the network sent you the whole package. So and then your phone loaded the whole package. And so then when you got out of cell service, you already had it fully loaded. Just like downloading a song or a podcast on your phone before you get out of service, it has it locally now. And so if you switch over, if you're listening to your podcast, say you are streaming a podcast, but you also have it downloaded. If you get out of cell service, your phone will switch it over to the downloaded one because it's tracking it, whether it's downloaded or not downloaded, because it has the same address. But then it just switches from the one that it's streaming to the one on your phone because they're connected.
Do you think it gives people a false sense of security, thinking all of my information is stored in the cloud, as opposed to all of my information is stored on somebody's computer, like a big computer at a big server farm? Like,
I think it should be.
I like the idea that it is just stored in the cloud, but now that I'm listening to all of this, it's like, oh, so every single thing I've ever searched for, every picture I've ever put on the internet, I mean, everything is literally stored on somebody's server somewhere.
I wish I could get my old MySpace back.
Oh, can we?
Where's Tom?
I know.
Tom,
wait, who?
Can we get the MySpace back?
We had Tom. We traded him in for Facebook. We traded him in for Mark Zuckerberg.
The alien.
The lizard.
The alien. But so yeah, that point that you make is valid, because it's like now, so if I have my papers, my very sensitive papers, over at my buddy's house,
right,
in a drawer somewhere, or in a box under his bed,
their Corvette in their garage,
somewhere like that,
somewhere secure.
Now I'm going to be asking, what's the security level at your house? Because these are very secure documents that I don't want anybody to see. And so I want to know that you're going to do your part, because you said you'd watch them. But what I'm telling you is they're very secure, and I don't want you to give them out to anybody or show anybody. Just keep them under your bed until I come back next week. The problem is now you're trusting that that person is going to have the level of security that you want when they don't.
Yeah.
Or they have what's called the Patriot Act, where now your friend gets a knock on the door from the government and they say, we want to see everything that's under the bed in that box. And he's like, how do you even know about that box? And he's like, well, you're stupid for talking over a cell phone because we listen to everything you say because of the Patriot Act. And we can come and grab it whenever we want. We can take the information whenever we want. So they can go to Facebook's, they can just subpoena in their mind, the corrupt DOJ could go in, the FBI could say, we want all of Kristin's pictures from Snapchat and we want them today. And
a lot of cats.
And they would all these flooding photos of cats over and over again, jumping and dancing and talking and whatever. And all of that stuff would be just turned over because they all have agreements because of the Patriot Act that they have to follow certain rules and certain things.
So speaking of Snapchat, all of these kids that have Snapchat that are like, oh, it just deletes the picture after I send it. Mm-hmm. It's not deleting anything, correct?
Well, it deletes it
deletes it off of that device, but it's keeping it on some server.
It deletes it from your phone and it deletes it from their phone locally,
but it keeps it
through the software in the app. But when it sent it, it had to go through the wire, or through the air, through the wires to their farm, which it had to be copied there, typically is copied there, for you to recall it again later in an investigation or for the Patriot Act or all those different things. They have to store it. And then it's sent over to your friend. And then it deletes both of yours and they keep that one on the server. So
I imagine, I don't know if anybody knows the movie Out Cold, but I imagine when they're chatting, this guy's like chatting like online with some lady, and it's the other guy that's like sitting there. He's like this pervert in his underwear. I'm like,
you never know.
It's so
that's why they have the show Catfish. Like
yeah.
People trust the internet way too much.
I know.
And now that you know how it works, like, what are we doing? We've given them so much leeway. So somebody might say, why would they take your stuff? Or why would the government even care about your Facebook pictures? It's like, well, they have quantum computers. So what they can do with all of that information is they can grab it all, everything from every phone.
They can replicate
throughout the world. And then they can replicate, exactly, they could replicate you and make you like, I don't know, a clone. And you will have all of the information and everything uploaded into a robot, an AI. I mean, who knows what they could do with the technology that they have obviously hidden from us. Because it's not, the whistleblowers are saying, like, I'm not just making this stuff up. These whistleblowers are saying, we have technology in Antarctica that is off the charts. It can, across the world, it can make an earthquake happen because we did it on accident. And I was there and I saw it happen. Like, that's what this guy said. Whoops. It happened in New Zealand. Christchurch, they had an earthquake and it was them accidentally making it happen. And they have he says they have a whole air traffic control system for their UFOs down there. That's how, if you have air traffic control for all of your planes, right? You don't want those planes to run into your UFOs that you know are out there running around because you're a secret program and you're the deep state and you want to keep your assets, your billions of dollars worth of stolen taxpayer money. You want to keep that, right? You don't want to waste it. And so they don't want these things to crash into each other. So they have like quantum style, air traffic control where they can communicate with these things and they know where all of them are in the sky at any given time. Even if it jumps from Egypt to America, they know about it. Blip off there, blips on there, but it still has the same call sign and they know how to track them. So if
what is that? Have you read anything or does anybody know what that does to a human body? to send them through something like that? Send them through a portal? Do people die? Like how do our bodies manage?
There's a lot of speculation that it's hard for people to go through it unless they have the electromagnetic field around them. That's why they do it within craft mostly. They don't really send a body through. But I think there is a way that they can do it. They have Project Looking Glass, which I think I've mentioned before, where they can see things. That's how you can see into the future and see back and everything like that, quantum way. And so time travel, that's why I always say I believe in time travel, because I understand a little bit about quantum physics. And the little bit that I understand about quantum physics means that I understand time travel. Because if you've even watched Endgame with Avengers, you know that Ant-Man comes back from the past and is like, what happened? Where'd everybody go? You know, because he traveled through. So think about like the ant movies and stuff like that, where the ants are really small and they move really fast, and the people are really big and they move really slow, just like in the movie. And that's the difference between the time, how things move in time and matter and space in quantum versus in our regular reality. Things can move so much faster because it's moving in a whole different almost dimension, if you think about it. Like it's
right.
That dimension's information, energy, all that stuff works differently. So if you can tap into that through the ether, you can just fly things all over the place, and then they can just disappear. And then people say, well, how does Bigfoot just disappear? How do you see footprints and then he just disappears? Well, maybe this entity that we call Bigfoot knows how to do that. He knows how to just disappear. Maybe he's an advanced race of some kind and he knows how to do it. Who knows? He might be a girl. Could you imagine one day if we just found like a whole bunch of Bigfoot, like a giant Bigfoot clan? Like some dude just like comes over a mountain one day and there's just like thousands of them. And they've been living there forever. And you're just like, wouldn't that be crazy to see like a ton? Yeah. Weird. You're just walking backwards like, okay. Gotcha. Nice to see you. What's for dinner? Not me.
Don't ask what's for dinner. If you show up to a Bigfoot camp, ever. Do not ask what's for dinner.
That's a good point. I'm glad you made it, because there might be somebody out there that would have.
So Rick would have been like, "What's for dinner?" I'd
what's for dinner? Don't say that. That might be us. He volunteers as tribute. Well, this has been fun. I mean, it's obviously an introductory type. Yeah. Sullivan's like, are we done yet? But it's an introductory to basically how your computers work, how the infrastructure of the internet works, and how we can be more educated so that we can teach our children, and we can understand what our children understand, because they understand this stuff a lot easier and faster than we do, because they have all of this information. Just think of if you had this information when you were in high school, if you could just look up what they can look up on YouTube.
We didn't even have the internet when I was in high school. We had encyclopedias. We still have them in fact.
Whoa. He said
we still have
we're
them
the same age
in the attic.
We're the same age, Rick. You're 3 months younger than me. That's it.
Whoa.
That's because you're my sugar mama.
Whoa.
Whoa, you's old. Well, that's been fun. I think it was good to get all that put together, because it's, everything works differently. But if you think about it like that, everything works from an address. If you want to know how to get something from point A to point B, you got to have an address. So when you ask, can you send a person through, a body through, as long as you have an address to go to, or you're lost, right? That's what they talk about in the, whatever it is, Endgame. You don't want to get lost out there, because if you don't have the correct address, you can fly right by it. They even showed that in the Mario movie. Sorry to keep going here, but they just had that Mario movie where he went through the tube and he was like flying through this rainbow dust, right? And then they get separated, and one goes off to one portal and one goes off to another portal. 2 different spots in the same world, but they end up in the same area, luckily. But they could have wandered off in all kinds of different multiverses, as they say. And that's how you start to understand, like, why does somebody talk about timeline? Like, there could be a different timeline. Mm-hmm. Well, if quantum is real, and we might not completely understand it, but there could be multiple timelines, multiple options. Just like in Endgame, where he says there's all of these different options, but there's only one that's going to work.
Right.
And that's the one that they choose to do. And it does work.
And it's depopulation.
It does work.
We heard that before.
Yep. They depopulate, and then he has to, Iron Man has to, spoiler alert, Iron Man has to give himself up at the end. He has to sacrifice himself to save everybody, right? Where have you heard that before? So that was fun.
So speaking of the Project Looking Glass, we should do an episode on that because it's very interesting to me.
It is, especially
now that I know so much more about computers.
Thanks, Rick.
Well, let us know if you like that, if you understood it, or if you want more information, or if you're not connecting the dots in certain areas. Get onto the Fringy chat. Ask. Mm-hmm. I check it all the time. I'll be on there conversing with you guys if you need more information. Obviously, we got a lot going on, but I love communicating with you guys and learning from you and you learning from us, and we just coming together as a team out there trying to wake everybody up. So that's my spiel. Hopefully you got everything out of this that you wanted, and don't forget to like, subscribe, share on all your social medias. Don't forget to review. That little couple seconds to just go in and write a quick review or just leave a 5-star. That's what gets those algorithms that we just got done talking about kicking at the right levels. So you go through this algorithm that's saying, if it gets 5 stars, then it gets put up here at the top of the stack. If it gets 3 stars, it gets a little bit lower. If it gets 1 star, it gets lower than that. So if you are going to give us a 1 star because you think we suck, that's fine. Do that, because that's your right. But if you do like what we're doing, all we're asking is that you just go in there and hit that, because that gives the algorithm the option to start putting us towards the top. And
we want to be in the platinum file cabinet.
That's what I'm talking about. The platinum file cabinet.
No gold, no silver, no bronze.
And not because we want to be famous or anything, because I definitely do not. What I want is the message of Jesus Christ to get out to as many people as possible. And I think the more you go in this direction and the more you start thinking about quantum and all that stuff, some things in the Bible really start to make a little more sense. So with that said, we are That's So Fringy Podcast. I'm Rick.
I'm Kristin.
And I'm Bethany. And this is Sully.
And this is Sullivan over here.
Out of here. Let's get it.
Bye.